Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming to 14 Lessons from TFT. I see a lot of amazing League cosplays here. Are you guys heading to the meetup after? Yeah, I heard the meetup got moved for our panel, and we do really, really appreciate that. How many of you came to hear us talk on Thursday about Remix Rumble? Yay, thank you so much. All right, so with the 14 lessons from TFT, we'll just go straight into it with some introductions. I'm Katie, and I'm here joined by Christina, Peter, and Woody from the TFT team today. We're really excited to take you back in time to the early days of TFT and what we have learned across 6 years and 14 sets. We promise it won't be a sugar-coated retrospective, and we're here to own up what has worked and the times that we have missed the mark. Well, most of you probably know what TFT is. Raise your hand if you play TFT. Okay, basically everybody. But just in case, for maybe someone tagging along with their friend, we'll do a quick history lesson and a TLDR for the players here. So TFT launched back in 2019 as a game mode for League of Legends. And in the 6 years since, we have become the largest PC strategy game in the world with over 300 million global players. And we currently ship 3 sets per year. So let's dive into it, and I'm going to pass the mic to Peter Whalen, our game director, for our first lesson.
Thanks, Katie. So lesson 1, this is our TFT IP lesson, the League of Legends toy chest. So TFT is a playground. It's a place where people come to celebrate their creativity, to combine cool toys together in their own way, and to experience a fresh puzzle every game. And these players love the League IP. One of the first reports I read when I started on TFT a few years ago referred to our audience as having face tattoo levels of League fandom. And while that's not literal for everyone, it's certainly evocative. So as TFT's IP has evolved, our most successful iterations have been true to these 2 cores, a celebration of creativity and a tongue-in-cheek reverence for Runeterra. And that's led to what we call the TFT toy chest, an IP model that says, we're going to give you a bunch of your favorite characters in an unusual situation. Do whatever you want with them. It's important that we're true to these characters, but at the same time, experiencing them in a novel way. Because at the end of the day, TFT isn't canon. We represent a whimsical, lighthearted, playful what if, filled with memes. It's a place where people get to tell their own League of Legends story. As a fun statistic, around 15% of our players play as IP enthusiasts. They'll play champions and strategies for their narrative rather than for their powers. My favorite example was from Runeterra Reforged, where we had players playing Garen and Katarina together in every comp. They shared no traits, they had essentially no strategic value, but when we dug into it, it turned out that for some people, shipping their favorite couple was much more important than winning. And that's true whether in the base IP or in one of our alternate universes. TFT's at its best when it's letting players tell stories across a wide range of themes. That can range from core Runeterra sets like Set 9 to sets based on a well-known genre like Set 10's Remix Rumble or Set 14's Cyber City to something based on a particular story like Set 13's Into the Arcane. And varying up those themes is important. Players come into each new set looking for something novel, so we try to find something new with every release. And speaking of new releases, that brings us to lesson 2, shake things up. We've experimented a lot over the last 6 years with the size and frequency of our sets. Right now, we release a new set every 4 months that swaps all the champions, the full thematic, and has 1 to 3 pretty big mechanical tweaks. We started with big sets like this every 6 months, and players definitely wanted more. So we added in mid-sets that were a lot smaller in scope. They evolved the theme instead of replacing it, swapped out a bit of content, and usually had 1 new mechanic. These were a lot less successful. In practice, they ended up being a ton of work, more than we expected, since we still needed to develop all the mechanics and figure out how all the new content interacted with all the stuff that was sticking around. But from the player perspective, they just weren't new enough. Current players felt like they weren't much of a change, and they'd get bored again pretty quickly, while people that had already left didn't see it as a moment worth coming back for. From a data perspective, large sets saw around 3.5 times the initial engagement as mid-sets. We moved to 3 sets per year, so 4-month intervals, and that's worked out pretty well. My guess is that the right frequency is somewhere in that 3 to 4 month range, and we'll keep trying things out until we find the sweet spot. The other piece of the puzzle is the content. How much should the game change, and how much should it be different? You're going to find stuff that's great. How much should last forever? And for that, I'll toss over to Witty, one of our principal game designers and the set lead of Remix Rumble for the next 2 lessons.
Thanks, Peter. That brings us to our third lesson, evolving set mechanics. With each set, we look to add some major element that fundamentally changes gameplay in a thematic way. We call these set mechanics, but they're more like set systems, an entire layer that shifts strategy and has a lot to play around. Doing a major mechanic every set is a lot of risk and a lot of work, but that intentional risk-taking has really benefited the game. Nearly every mechanic has shown up again or had a part of it permanently added to the game, like 7.5's Treasure Dragon showing back up as a Cyber City hack. And at worst, when the risk doesn't pay off, we come away with clear learnings for things to avoid or think about differently. Early on, we were light touch with these, like Set 3 Galaxies with its aptly named Galaxies mechanic, which nowadays is just a core system with opening encounters like Scuttle Puddle. Over time, we increased the scope and impact of set mechanics until we reached our biggest one, augments, introduced with our 6th set, Gizmos and Gadgets. I'll talk more about augments in a moment, but once we decided it should stick around permanently, we had a new problem. Everything could be an augment. With such a broad system, we had to shift set mechanics to differentiate themselves from augments. Hacks in Cyber City are a good example of this. They focus on giving all players more resources on an unpredictable schedule, in contrast to augments' more predictable timing and emphasis on choice. Nowadays, we also try to find the sweet spot of how big and focus-grabbing the mechanic is. Not every mechanic needs to be the same size. Ultimately, set mechanics still have the same goals, though. Take some risks, experiment, and learn from it. It's been great to see you all enjoying hacks, and I look forward to seeing how future mechanics can continue to surprise you. Now on to our 4th lesson, how augments changed the game. This was a big turning point for TFT. Up until then, even if a set mechanic was well received, we knew they needed to be removed at the start of the next set, or else we would be piling on too many things over time. However, augments were received very well, and importantly, they improved the depth and strategy in ways that felt very at home in the genre. They're so core that even when we revive sets that didn't originally have augments, we add them, which Christina will talk more about in a bit. However, a few things have changed about how we think about them. First, we've discovered how much of a breath of fresh air that adding to and swapping out augments creates. So we've increased the frequency and amount of augments that we swap set to set. Second, we've built out more categories of augment design space to keep them memorable, including hero augment style transformations of individual champions and high-stakes pivot augments like one of my favorites, Golemify. Finally, augments have caused us to shift some of our goals of other systems. They're so good at creating unique and memorable games that we've actually reduced the impact a bit of other parts of the game, like reducing the power of items. Which brings us to the broader lesson of re-examining the purpose and success of a game's core system as the game ages. Things that you thought would be received in a certain way will naturally shift as the game and the player base matures. So it's important to stop down and reassess sometimes. But everyone plays differently, and I'll hand it back to Peter to talk about some different player motivations.
Thanks, Witty. So that brings us to lesson number 5. Winning isn't everything. High-stakes play isn't limited to augments. While plenty of people come to TFT for the deep strategy or to tell their story of forbidden love between Twitch and Kog'Maw, there's a huge group that just wants to go big. They want giant cash outs. They want gold and items raining from the sky in armies of 3-star 5 costs. And for those players, we've got Chonk's Treasure. I'll defer the story of Chonk's Treasure to Christina, but I want to talk about its predecessor, our first ever game mode, Hyperroll. Hyperroll was originally released back in 2021 as a more straightforward, shorter TFT experience that could help new players find the fun fast. It threw out econ, told you to play fast and loose with your gold, and took much less time than a normal TFT game. And that sounded great in theory, but in practice, it ended up being harder for most new players than vanilla TFT. The lack of downtime meant you needed a ton of set familiarity, and the high tempo meant it was pretty easy to get knocked out early. The dream of Hyperroll was pretty enticing, though. Some players wanted Hyper Econ. For them, we've got Chonk's Treasure. Some players wanted to play at their own pace. For them, we've got Talker's Trials, and some more things in the pipe, including a new, limited-time, progression-focused PvE game mode coming later this year. And some players just wanted something a bit less competitive. For them, we've got set revivals with their own progression system. And so, over time, as we ship more modes, Hyperroll saw less and less play, down now to around 2% of global hours. So we made the difficult decision to turn it off at the end of the Cyber City set. We'll continue to look for ways to hit on the motivations of Hyperroll, of a shorter, more laid-back TFT experience. But for now, we want to continue to invest in a broader range of events and game modes that better serve our players. At the same time, we're grateful to all of our players for trying out and giving us feedback on our first ever game mode. It's thanks to your support that we've been able to try out so many new things and to continue to invest deeply in events and new game modes. And to talk about those modes, let me toss it over to Christina, our lead product manager for events.
Thanks, Peter. So on to lesson 6, explore core player motivations. When it comes to developing our own game modes, we approach it from the angle of exploring our key players' core gameplay motivations, and that's really the core of how we do game mode development on TFT. Specifically, modes should serve highly desired but underserved gameplay motivations of our core players. So let's break that down. Since TFT is a strategy game at its core, all of our game modes should scratch that puzzle-solving itch. But what else do players want? Let's take Chonk's Treasure, for example, one of our most popular game modes. It was first released, for those who remember, as a mode for a Lunar New Year event in 2023 called Fortune's Favor. It really juices up the TFT experience. It gives players a ton of econ, ton of resources. It even gives players a high-cost unit to start the game. Players loved it so much, so we've been bringing it back every set since last year. Why do we think this is such a successful game mode? We believe players love Chonk's Treasure because it really leans into the high power fantasy motivation in TFT. So if you play standard TFT, you're very used to the standard cap of your board. But in Chonk's Treasure, you can more consistently build more powerful boards than you could in standard TFT. I think what I realize is that it's somehow both quite degenerate, but also ridiculously fun just to watch a fight between 2 3-star 5 costs and praying that yours is the one that casts first so that you can win. We use this framework to guide all event mode development in TFT. Event modes can break standard rules of TFT, but only to serve the highly desired gameplay motivations of our core players. So speaking of building content our players love, we'll go on to lesson 7, which is deliver nostalgia. So we started doing set revivals actually last year as a key part of delivering nostalgia to our players. And the genesis behind this is that with releasing sets and taking them away, we know we've built a lot of sets that players have become attached to and that they really love. And so conversely, that means that we've also taken away a lot of sets that players wish we never would have taken away. So we're used set revivals as a way to deliver that nostalgia and really bring back the content for both our veteran players and also newer players who wish they were around when they could have played the older sets. We found that there's so many different ways to approach delivering nostalgia. So we can either stay completely true to the original set content, or we can take the original set content, completely update it, modern systems, items, mechanics, everything. The current sweet spot so far, for those who've been playing revivals, is that we decided to mostly stay true to the original set content. This means that we want to revive the set mechanic, the champions, traits, mainly stay true to their original form, but we add novelty through systems updates, like adding augments and other changes. So we'll talk about our most recent Festival of Beasts revival, for example, that we did for Lunar New Year earlier this year. This set was released before augments ever even existed. And so like we do for all set revivals, we decided to add augments, we added opening encounters, we updated prismatic trait breakpoints, among other changes. And the result is that we're able to deliver the original Festival of Beasts set, but with a modern twist for both new and veteran players alike. I think that we've done something, we'd like to experiment a lot in set revival, so we've done some things like personal bags, which we were like, okay, this is a good experiment, we're not gonna do it again. So that's why you'll see the update that we take all the learnings for future sets to make sure we continuously improve set revivals. And set revivals are honestly another good reminder to ourselves of how good we have it as like modern TFT players when we bring back old traits and abilities like assassins and blind that we most likely won't print in any modern TFT anytime soon. So I talked a lot about serving our core players, but what about approachability for all players? I'll let Witty get into that.
Thanks, Christina. So that brings us to our 8th lesson about keeping the game approachable. TFT is a big game. There's a lot to learn, and there are a lot of ways to go 8th. While the game expands and matures, it's important to keep finding ways to make the game less intimidating to new and returning players. One way we've accomplished this recently is with Talker's Trials, our PvE mode. While not strictly for new players, we do think it's a great way to get familiar with a new set without jumping straight into PvP. There's no round timer, which helps a lot because it gives players as much time as they need to read and consider their choices and next steps. Sometimes, though, keeping the game approachable is more about the little things. TFT has added a lot of quality of life features over time, many that you may not remember how you lived without them before. So I want to see a show of hands. First, how many people remember when items didn't pop off of carousel units after you picked them? Okay. Going back further, how many people remember when there wasn't a small glow on champions that you already had a copy of? Okay, a little bit less. How many remember when there weren't even in-game item recipes? Okay, about the same. And how many people remember when unit stats weren't even displayed in the inspect panel? Even less. That was only beta. So we've added a lot of these small quality of life features over time, and we think they're kind of very important to keeping the game approachable. And we think they help veteran players as well. It helps you focus on the depth of the game rather than needing to keep something up on a second monitor just to keep track of things. Another big approachability feature is the Team Planner. Team Planner has been very well received. There's a huge number of you on PC and especially on mobile who make use of it every game. And yes, Team Planner is a feature that we want to keep adding more to in the future. So much it can do, and it's just very helpful. We want to keep the game deep and challenging, so anytime that we find ways to help players access that depth, we consider that a win. And with that, I'll hand it back to Peter.
Thanks, Witty. So I'm going to return back to talking about IP. For lesson number 9, I'm going to talk about fleshing out the world. While League of Legends is fantastic at building up top-tier champions, and Legends of Runeterra and Riftbound go broad on world building, TFT occupies a unique niche. Sets have over 50 champions, but because of the nature of TFT's drafting, they're all important. That means that we get to celebrate characters that might be too small for League, but give them more screen time than a single card. Take, for example, Into the Arcane, based on Riot's recent Netflix show. League brought in the new leads, Mbessa and Mel, but there were plenty of other interesting and fun characters that you saw on screen. TFT was a great home for them. From the father figure Vander to the terrifying Chembaron of Smeech, players enjoyed getting to tell their own stories with characters they couldn't play anywhere else. And while TFT is great at highlighting characters from elsewhere in the Runeterra IP, we've also had fun generating our own characters. Last year, we badly needed a cute tank. We wanted someone who'd work as a low-cost unit, who was upbeat, and who wasn't named Poppy. Lots of our tanks were serious or scary, and we wanted more variety, especially since we keep making all Yordle origins. Enter Kabuko. He's the first TFT exclusive character, and he's even shown up in League's most recent game mode, Brawl, as a shopkeeper. Players really liked him, enough that for Cyber City, we brought him back with a skin as a new 5-cost cyber boss. And speaking of skins, let me pass over to Christina to talk about tacticians.
Thanks, Peter. So lesson 10, expressing fandom, and specifically through cosmetics. So we make a ton of different type of cosmetics in TFT, but for today, I'll focus on how our player learnings have really shaped how we approach tacticians, our in-game player avatars, over time. When TFT first launched, we wanted to make sure that there was a variety of content types for our players to be accessible for, and similar to what players could experience in League of Legends. So going back to fleshing out the world that Peter talked about, one of the cosmetics we prioritized early on were called Little Legends. So these new creatures have unique personas, and we've developed many different types for our players to engage with. So we have examples here, our beloved mascot Pengu, iconic and spirited Chunk. I don't know how many of y'all have seen one of our newer Little Legends, Docat. And this bottom right is my personal favorite. It's like the chaotic and devious energied Whisker. So as we've invested more in player creative expression, we realized that some players still wanted to express their fandom for league champions within TFT. So we looked to complement Little Legends with a new product. And in 2021, we released one of our most popular cosmetics to date, Chibi Champions. Chibis are very adorable, bite-sized versions of their League of Legends counterparts, and it's just very fitting for the whimsical and more playful nature of TFT. And while chibis are extremely popular, we also realized over time that not all champions fit the chibi aesthetic, and not all players even wanted to just play with chibis. So because we want a wide variety of cosmetics to allow players to express themselves, we started exploring Unbound Tacticians. And these are a newer way for players to express themselves, their champion affinity, more closely tied to the original aesthetic and power fantasy associated with champions. So Unbound doesn't always mean that we're only going to be exploring darker vibes like with Arcane Jinx Unbound and Arcane Warwick Unbound, but also allows us to express more badass vibes like with the recent release of Project Vayne Unbound. Over the years, we've adapted our cosmetic strategy as we learned what players truly loved. And so we'll continue to invest in our current cosmetic categories like tacticians and arenas, but also we've been making newer content types like portals. Ultimately, the goal of cosmetics is really just to give our players more ways to express their fandom within TFT. So, just like how our cosmetics have evolved over time, I'll pass it over to Witty to talk about how our gameplay mechanics have evolved over time.
Thanks, Christina. So for these next two lessons, we're going to get into a bit more gameplay history of TFT. And the first one, the 11th lesson, is why we avoid sharp counters. In early TFT's development, we were excited by sharp, clear counterplay being a defining feature of the game. We expected strategy players would feel clever if they were able to size up the rest of the lobby throughout the game and have their choices influenced by whether they could counter particular opponents. Because of this, in set 1 and 2, traits especially had sharply defined purposes, like dragons being completely immune to magic damage, and Yordle's ability to dodge. However, it quickly became clear that we were wrong. Instead, players wanted to focus on their own team comp, and didn't want to worry too much that the fun strategy that they enjoyed playing or wanted to try out would be invalidated by other players. The game already had a high burden of strategic choice, so for most people, it was just overwhelming to also need to frequently scout and evaluate whether other players were going to counter them. It was also simply more fun to feel like you could instead go for the strongest possible version of your own strategy, chasing that moment when you got to pull all of the pieces together and have a super powerful version of your army. But moving away from sharp counters actually had some challenges, with Assassins being a good example of this. Assassins as a trait existed for the first 7 sets of TFT with slight variations, always about jumping into the enemy team at the start of combat to counter unprotected, squishy backliners. One thing we think about a lot is fights playing out in a variety of ways. We think things get boring if every fight is a ranged backliner on either side killing enemies from front to back. And Assassins are a fun fantasy. League has a ton of champions that are all about sneaking their way onto high priority targets. So we didn't want to take away the idea of assassins entirely, and we didn't make that decision lightly. But at the end of the day, the trait was still acting as a sharp counter to other strategies in every set. So something needed to change. We realized that the assassin pattern simply wasn't a good fit for an entire trait's worth of units. So nowadays, we instead look to other methods to give comps occasional backline access, with things like Prowler's Claw, or individual units with ways to get onto the backline with their abilities. This helps maintain that interesting fight texture and positioning interest I was talking about earlier, but in a less ever-present way. Sharp counters can be a great fit for other games, but for TFT, they don't quite belong. But it took us a lot of trial and error to get to where we are today. Another thing that took a lot of trial and error is items, which is our 12th lesson, all about the evolution of items. This is another system that's changed a lot over 14 sets. Initially, the item system was simply 8-component items that built into 36 standard items. Now we have 2 more components, radiant versions of standard items, artifacts, support items, and consumables. So let's talk about each of those categories and how they fit together. First is standard items. Initially, without augments around, standard items were a lot of the spice and variety in the game. They were powerful, transformative, and very unique to one another. Understanding itemization was a big way to get a leg up on opponents. However, something just didn't feel right. Items were so important that they felt game-defining and often overshadowed champions themselves. We'd sometimes refer to this as playing your items rather than playing your champions. Not only was that undercutting the fantasy of individual champions doing their cool thing, but it created a second problem. As part of rotating sets, we wanted items to be the most stable piece. Champions, trait, theme, and set mechanics are always changing. So items are meant to be the reliable system that if you haven't played in a while, you can count on it being pretty much the same. But as problems arose on individual items, especially those more unique, sometimes broken ones, we had to start reworking things that weren't fitting the current set. We continued on that path that we weren't particularly happy with for a while. And then a few things happened. First, we started to nerf items and make them more generic in some of those early sets. Then there was a series of experiments that changed how we thought about items. First, we tried more powerful, unique items in Fates, our 4th set, with Ornn items, which eventually became the artifact items. Then we tried a more expansive item system with shadow components building into shadow items, which we liked the expansion and maybe not some of the individual shadow items and their kiss-curse nature. And then we experimented with more powerful versions of the base items, which were radiant items. Finally, then came augments, and we pulled the best part of those experiments into the game permanently, which gets us close to where we are today. But as one of the 4 core systems of TFT, we still consider items to be evolving. Standard items are now firmly lower power and more flexible, leading to less reworks and putting champions at the forefront again. This pairs well with artifacts, the most unique items which are aimed to only be good on a handful of champions in each set, which lets players really cook up some unique strategies. Radiant items give us another axis of power upgrades, and support items round out a place to put some designs that we really like that don't quite fit into other categories, like Zerat Portal. All that is to say, items have changed a lot, even though it wasn't our original intent. And it's been a big improvement to the game that we weren't stuck in our original thinking of what the item system was supposed to be. That wraps up items, so I'll pass it to Katie to talk about some awesome community events.
Thanks, Weddy. So talking about community and esports, and something that has really contributed to the success of our 3-set model is how we integrate them together. So we want to create a moment at the end of each set that is wholly dedicated to TFT, like a TFT weekend. And what better place than the Tactician's Crown, which is the pinnacle of competitive TFT, that happens at the end of each set. During this weekend, we gradually reveal the next set by sharing Easter eggs around what players can expect thematically, and then we keep up the hype and debut our Deb Drop, which features gameplay updates like new trades, new units, and the new mechanic. The goal here is for us to create this handoff moment between sets for our most hype esports moment. And it's a grand farewell to say goodbye to the previous set and also welcome the next set. And we have found this to be really resonant with our players and especially TFT enthusiasts and are also fans of TFT esports. And not only that, community initiative is something that is really, really important to the team, and our streamers are the consistent advocates for our game, and we work really closely with them to create meaningful moments for all of you. A standout example is the Box Bootcamp, which is a 2-week event held at the start of each set at the set release, where hundreds of streamers and their community members will come together to compete, learn, and celebrate TFT. The bootcamp includes divisions for casual, advanced, and pro players and fosters a supportive coaching environment through a dedicated Discord server. The participants will race to climb the ladder in their respective divisions with prizes awarded to top performers and their communities. A few sets ago, the team introduced a community component where the fans can sign up and support their favorite streamer. The winning supporter and their chosen creator will both earn rewards. This is a really fun and engaging and a highly anticipated event that has transformed our set launches into moments of shared excitement and growth. And in recognition of that impact, we've partnered with BoxBox to create the unique Boom cosmetic, which is given free to all participants. Supporting creators and community-driven initiatives like this is core to how TFT operates. And with the new video, Bootcamp Boom, I'll pass it off to Christina.
Thanks, Katie. So to wrap things up, I'll actually channel our EP Jeff here. He's the very, very serious-looking guy in the chonk headwear. So something he says often is that the best time to be a TFT player is 6 months from now. After that, the best time to be a TFT player is 6 months from then, and so on. I love this message. I think it really encapsulates the spirit of the TFT development team. So we've released 14 sets from now, but there's just so much that we all talk about that we still want to do for players. We have such a unique community in TFT, and we're really grateful to have a super passionate player base that's very vocal with feedback and just so engaged with us, both like online and within the game. And so we can't wait to share what we've been cooking. So to our players, I think the best is yet to come. With that, I'll wrap things up, and we can open up for questions.
Yeah, so if you have any questions for the team, feel free to line up at the mics, and we'll go until we can't anymore. Thank you.
Hello. I was wondering if you see a future for TFT where tournaments or esports are more accessible, either through more open events or private lobbies or Clash-like events within the client itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at, sorry, when we look at esports for TFT, our motto has always been that it's participation first. One of the things that's most important to us is that instead of TFT being focused on a watch experience, like lots of esports, we want players to be able to go from playing on mobile on their couch to the World Championship in a single set. And so figuring out ways to continue to open up esports to more players is something that we continue to invest in. So you'll see that over the last couple of years, too. We've gone from, sorry, my voice is dying. We've gone from a small number of events to more Tacticians Crowns, to the TFT Opens, like Vegas, Macau, Paris this year. So we'll continue to expand the esports scene. We have some more ideas that we're not ready to announce yet on how we can open it up even more broadly than that, but opening TFT esports up is something that's really important to us.
Cool. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Ben. I was wondering if there's any core design pillars you stick to when developing new augments, or what your sort of approach is there?
Yeah, so augments, ultimately, we want them to feel unique to one another is a big goal for us, especially for prismatic augments, right? We want a prismatic game to be memorable. We want it to be something you kind of chase or tell your friends about afterwards. There's various considerations around how we kind of think about the different tiers, right? Those lower tiers sort of help the higher tiers stand out more. And then if you have like a triple prismatic game, that can really be this crazy combination of things. It's also somewhat to what I was talking about with items. It's also a system that kind of needs to play in harmony with other systems, so it needs to not ever get to a point where it totally overshadows the power of champions. It kind of needs to feed back into the thing that is kind of the fun, the core fun of TFT, which is, you know, characters with their individual abilities, doing their own cool thing. And the other thing about augments, I also a little bit talked about this, but want to emphasize it, is we think it's a lot of the freshness of the game, right? We want people to get excited by new traits and new champions, but we've learned more and more over time that we also want players to get excited by new augments with every set. I'm actually really happy with our sort of like hacked augments in the current set, black market augments, how they kind of brought back some older pieces, but we want more like set specific augments. Hero augments has been a good space for us, stuff like that. So yeah, something we keep playing with. Thank you.
So TFT is obviously a game with a lot of randomness by design. But as the game has evolved and more things like augments have been added to additional systems, I think most people would agree the amount of randomness has only gone up mostly over time. Is there a sense of times where you've gone too far, or a sense of where you want to lever random versus non-random elements in the designs of, you know, current or future sets?
Yeah, so I think about this and we talk about it as a team in a few ways. One is a game that is a collection of a lot of random events can often lead to less randomness in a way. It kind of smooths itself out. You know, the philosophy of the more dice you roll, the more it averages out, that sort of stuff. But more importantly than that is we tend to want our random systems to be systems that you still have control over, right? So it's less of the stuff you've seen us kind of move away from, more random, like targeting in combat is a big thing we've moved away from, or just kind of getting like screwed by, oh, this spell was mid-flight and then this unit died so it did nothing. We want to push that randomness more into, oh, here's 3 random augments, now I get a meaningful decision that I can shape my game based on. So it's always, for us, we kind of come at it from, we want randomness, but we want randomness that is a skill test and something that the best players, and I think you see this especially in esports, are like, wow, they're so good at adapting to their individual circumstances that they're playing lines that other players might not necessarily even see. And I think that's a really cool part of the system in the game.
I really want to emphasize that last point, that adapting to randomness, that randomness actually breeds strategy is really important, that you're presented with these things and it's different game over game and how you're able to react to that. It's not necessarily about memorizing openings or memorizing comps. It's like, I see these augments, I see these items, what is the best line that I can take? I think that's one of the really important pieces of TFT strategy and TFT development is how do we make sure that the randomness that we're creating enhances the strategy rather than detracts from it.
Thank you.
All right, hello. I'm sorry in advance, this is going to be a bit more of a curveball of a question. If someone were interested in applying to either the internship program or a full-time position with TFT, what would you say is a number 1 or maybe number 2 thing to focus on, either skill-wise or maybe application-wise?
There's 2 answers I'll basically always give for that. It depends on exactly what kind of role you're looking for. I'm imagining you're looking at a design role.
Yes.
So one is the general advice I'll give for anybody going into games, which is go and make a game. The single best skill for us to see is, hey, I shipped this thing. It can be something tiny on an app store. It can be something really small on a website. You can just say, I had someone once in an interview bring in paper cards that they had printed out and say, hey, I made this game. Do we have 10 minutes at the end of this interview? And we can just play back and forth. That kind of stuff really helps. Both initial idea generation for a game, but also how did I iterate on it? How did I test it? And then how did I finalize it and get into a place where I was actually comfortable shipping it? Super, super, super valuable skills, and demonstrating that you've gone through that process can really help a lot. The other thing that I'll say for TFT specifically, and I think it's probably true for most live games, is play the game. You don't have to hit Challenger, though, man, that's great if you do. But if you can talk intelligently about the situations that you've encountered, you've played hundreds of games at TFT, it really, really helps. We'll have people that come in that haven't played TFT, and it's certainly doable, but it's so much easier to succeed on the team and to get through the whole process if you have a strong TFT background.
I'll also add, before I got into the games industry, I didn't kind of realize how many different sort of roles and positions existed. So gaining some familiarity there. I, for example, didn't start in game design. I started in QA, and there's just like lots of awesome positions and jobs across different companies. And then I'll even specifically shout out riotgames.com/careers. The whole company spends some time making sure that's like accurate and up to date. So if you check that out, you'll be able to see like, hey, what are the actual roles and like expectations that the company and the TFT team is hiring for?
And TFT does have lots of roles open right now. It's a great team. If you have a good skill set match, we'd love to have you. And for design positions in particular, I think we'll be opening up some of those in the next month or two.
So in set 13, Powder's wind-up monkey encounter generally got a lot of groans from my lobbies. Call it confirmation bias. I think I only ever saw the damage aspect of it. What's the internal discourse like when there's a mechanic that just kind of feels bad?
So I actually think that TFT's at its best when it has high moments and low moments. And so, yes, we absolutely do not want most encounters in a set, or even 80% of encounters in a set to be, oh, really? Stillwater Hold is my favorite example of this. When we were doing the portals for set 9, the amount of internal games where somebody got Stillwater Hold and they're like, this is dumb, you guys shouldn't ship this, no way, this is the worst thing ever, was actually frighteningly high. But the number of stories that I've heard from people playing set 9 where it's like, no, 7 of us stood on the fun portals and that one guy stood on Stillwater Hold and it went there.
I'm the one guy.
Great. Those are memorable, and having those memorable moments where you have this emotional connection to the game, I actually think is really important, even if some of those emotions are negative. And again, we don't want that happening in 95% of games, but having that happen a couple of times a set, like you said, I think that's really healthy. I think it's good for people to have things that they're latching onto and remembering. And just being put into different scenarios that they maybe wouldn't have wanted to be put in otherwise.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
I think Double Up is probably my favorite game mode, just for the co-op aspect, and it's helped me introduce a lot of friends to TFT. I was wondering if you had any lessons or interesting stories around the development of Double Up.
I don't know if this is lessons or stories, but Double Up's really great, and it's one of those modes that when I talk to rioters, the most common thing I hear is, oh, you work on TFT? I love playing Double Up with my insert person, brother, sister, partner, whatever. So it's probably, I don't know if this is an actual true statistic, I'm just making it up on the spot, but it's certainly the most rioter-played mode that people talk to me about. So it's certainly a place that we continue to invest in. We've had lots of crazy pitches for Double Up. There was one engineer on the team who basically every time we had a Q&A would say, like, hey, I really just want to make Double Up 4-pair lobbies. Can I just go and do that? And it's like, yes, we want to do that, but we need some more infrastructure in place to do it. And we just released that, of course. So I think it's one of those places that we're going to continue to invest in. It serves a different, to Christina's point, motivation set than I think a lot of our other game modes. It serves this really unique niche for players that are extremely, extremely passionate about Double Up in particular.
Yeah, and just to add to that, what's interesting about Double Up, I'm also a huge Double Up fan, I love it, is that we've seen most players actually tend to play with a partner. So people don't typically queue Double Up solo. Of course, that's possible and it happens, but when I play Double Up, I don't know about you, it's like I see so many people loading in, matching tacticians just to intimidate people, completely the exact same elo, meaning they only play with each other. And so there's been a lot of things internally where, to Peter's point, people get really passionate about double up, even internally. I know some designers who are like, they want to pitch double up augments so bad, like very specific, potentially heinous ones, but also very fun ones. So it is a mode that we continue, as y'all saw with the launch of Cyber City. There's a huge investment in double up. I think the canon has been quite amazing, made sending much more smooth. Hopefully y'all feel that way as well. And it's definitely a mode that I can't imagine that we would ever stop investing in.
I've also heard of people going on double up dates, which always delights me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, here's like that you met through double up is very interesting, yes.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Hello. Going off of double up as well. So like we were just saying, my fiance and I love to play double up together all the time. But our competitive days are way behind us. And I was curious as to why double up by default is ranked, and if that will ever be an option to not play ranked.
That is something that we talk about. I worry a little bit about splitting out the double up audience into multiple groups. I would like to make sure that everybody's having a great experience there. The double up ranked system's a little bit different than our normal ranked system. It's a little bit more progression focused. I think that there's a world where we could move that to be even more progression focused, depending kind of on what the double up audience is looking for. So I guess to answer the original question, I doubt we'll move to a world where we split double up into a normal and ranked queue, but I could easily see a world where we make the ranked system more progression focused. Something like what we do with set revivals, I think is really cool. But there's no plans right now to mess with that in particular.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you. Made it to platinum once, so I'm proud.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Nice.
Hello. So I had two questions, if that's okay. The first one, I'm actually going to go because it's based off of Double Up. Have you guys ever had any sort of consideration to do like a Talker's Trial co-op mode or some sort of tower defense where you could not take away from the player base, but still allow two people to learn a system together without getting stomped by other people?
Have we considered it? Yes, very yes. Are we doing it in the immediate future? Probably not. The way most people are engaging with talkers right now is kind of on their own time. And so I don't know that they want to be doing that with somebody else. I think we have to make a slightly different experience to tackle that. But the idea of two people doing a PvE thing together, or two people being able to introduce the game, like one person who's played a lot of TFT introducing it to somebody else, that sounds awesome. We do see a fair amount of like screen sharing kind of stuff, or the very physical screen sharing of like, I'm just gonna stand over your shoulder and tell you why what you did was wrong, kind of approach to learning. So I guess that was kind of a long rambling answer. This is a space that we think is really cool. We have to figure out the right way to approach it, and whether that's through talkers or through another lens, we'll see. PvE as a whole is something that we're very interested in. I just mentioned that we're doing a progression-focused PvE mode later this year. That'll be limited time. I'm very excited for that. Christina, I know, is very excited for that. She's been leading that project. So that's definitely a space that we'll continue to look into more deeply.
Cool. Awesome. My second question was with another spin-off like Wild Rift. They have like unique cosmetics. Has there ever been a thought to make unique cosmetics for TFT, or even for people like Kabuko who only exist in that one space?
Sorry, like unique Kabuko skins for TFT, or to use the Wild Rift cosmetics?
So more for like, I guess for chibis, and like characters that come out that you could purchase, where it's like, oh hey, this is the chibi skin that's exclusive to like a TFT set that you wouldn't see in regular League.
For sure. There's no reason that we wouldn't. I think TFT has lots of space to explore what cosmetics we can do. At the same time, there's plenty of League skins that people know and love and that are extremely resonant for them, and being able to put the TFT twist on that, I think is really fun.
Yeah, and if you think about it, actually, we did do one recently with Into the Arcane with the Arcane superfan Annie, the Prestige Annie. Yeah. So it's I know for our cosmetics team, they have a lot of fun exploring new like skins, whether it's you know, League skins or even drawing inspiration from like Wild Rift skins. But also, that is a space that our cosmetics team definitely wants to explore, is like building TFT unique skins. So it's a lot of work, but our cosmetics team is pretty amazing, and so I'm sure that they'll continue to like go in that direction probably.
Yeah, I think there's in fact a chibi coming out soon that has a very unique TFT specific skin, but I'm not going to spoil anything.
So ominous.
I think just as a whole, TFT likes experimenting with things. Like Witty mentioned, we just try things out. And if people like it, we'll do more of it. And if people don't like it, we'll just not do it anymore, or we'll do less of it. I think that's true on mechanics. That's true on cosmetics as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Hello. I've actually never played TFT, but I find the iterative development process you're using pretty interesting. So I was wondering, does the current set incorporate data from the previous sets? And if it does, how do you go about processing the feedback you get, drafting solutions, and then testing them in such a short, I think you said 3 to 4 month time period?
I can speak to this. Kind of 2 things come to mind. If you haven't seen them, if you're not as much of a TFT player, we actually put out a learnings article after every set that gets into some pretty specific detail about what happened with the set, things that went well, things that went poorly. On a more like timeline basis, the general way that we approach it is that we try to get ahead. So, the development of the next set does not start right after the next one launches. We kind of have them on a rolling schedule and multiple teams, but we try to make sure that there's room at the end so that as the previous set is getting into players' hands and we're getting that real-time feedback, that we can sort of make those adjustments on the fly. It's actually a pretty big advantage that I think we have in the strategy space as a digital game that can kind of change things at the last minute or patch things as necessary compared to something where you need to like print it out and ship it to distributors. We try to integrate learnings constantly, and again, we're always looking for player feedback, so yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, my apologies if you answered this Thursday, but I'm curious if this kind of interactive music sound design that you have with Remixed Rumble is something you've explored bringing back for a set or integrated more into like the base gameplay of like TFT, because that was something that like I loved.
Yeah, so just for everyone's awareness, the music set Remix Rumble is coming back as a set revival. So anyone who didn't get to experience that, what we call the music remix system, you can play it on live very soon. We haven't talked as much about a way to integrate that into base sets. It was much more practical to do it when we were saying, hey, literally each of these groups of characters represents a very clear genre of music, like K-pop or country or disco, but I wouldn't say we would never explore it. I think it's a good question and something there's definitely interest in.
Thank you.
People liked it a lot. Makes it more likely to come back at some point.
Thank you.
Hello. Has there been any thoughts on adding new components to TFT? Like item components to make like a whole new set of items?
We just added a frying pan,
yeah,
right?
Frying pan was recent. I think frying pan has gone well. I don't know that we would ever completely rotate like a huge chunk or all of the components. That kind of speaks to that, like, we want items at the end of the day to be the most stable piece. But we are still changing items as necessary. So probably not a full thing, but we'll keep tweaking.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm curious about what the drawbacks are for keeping an underperforming mode such as hyper-roll in the game.
Mostly resource investment from the team. So there's only so many things that we can do at any given point in time. And so the question is, where are those people spending their time and their energy? If we invest resources in updating hyper-roll, there's a bunch of changes that we need to make for every single set. We can spend it there, or we can spend it on developing new modes, whether that's investing in set revivals, investing in making the sets bigger and better, investing in set revivals. There's a whole bunch of different things that the TFT team's excited about. We have no lack of ideas for cool things that we can do. So it's just a trade-off between, are we doing these cool new things? Are we making the things that we have right now better? Are we investing them in updating existing modes? And so when we looked at something like hyper-roll, the play hours for it had continued to go down, the number of people that were playing, the number of games, so that it's around 2% of total hours right now. And looking at all of the data around that, we wanted to invest that time and that effort that we were putting in there into things that were going to appeal to more players and that more people were going to interact with.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to PvE. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. So it's set 14, so it's been 4 sets since you guys have swapped to doing, 3 sets a year versus having 2 sets in a mid-set. Obviously, there's some gains you guys had of having maybe a longer development time for each individual set, but have there been any unexpected challenges of swapping to that new format?
One thing is just the faster turnover of theme. I wouldn't even call it a large challenge. We have a lot of themes that we're excited for, and different ways to kind of re-explore different skin lines or kind of do things that are similar but different to previous sets, like Inkborn Fables kind of having pieces of Fates but being still pretty different. But that's a challenge, honestly, that we're really excited to take on, because again, there's just so many themes we want to get through. But other than that, I think it's just gone really well. And like Peter said, we want to get that cadence right, but it's either probably that or maybe a little faster. We'll see.
Thank you.
That was the last question.
Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate you coming out and hearing us speak. We're going to hang out in room 205, which is the room next door. If you want. Sorry, 204. Almost got it right. If you want to come chat with us for a little bit, and then maybe we can head to the cosplay meetup together from there. So we'll see you in a bit. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.